I am Jim Collison and live from the Gallup Studios here in Omaha, Nebraska. This is Gallup's Theme Thursday, Season 6, recorded on March 5th, 2020. Theme Thursday is a Gallup webcast series that dives deep into the CliftonStrengths themes, one theme at a time. This season, based on developing teams and managers with CliftonStrengths. In today's, we are looking at the executing theme, or the executing domain wrap. If you're listening live, love to have you join us in our chat room. There's a link to it. If you're watching on our live page right above me here, there's a link to it that'll take you to the YouTube instance that has a chat room embedded in it. If you have questions after the fact, you can send us an email, coaching@gallup.com. Don't forget to subscribe to us on YouTube if you're watching there on YouTube. That way you get notified whenever we create something new. If you want to listen to us as a podcast, just go to any podcast app and search Gallup Webcasts. Micah Librant is our host today. She's a workplace consultant here at Gallup. Micah, always great to see you. I'm excited about today. Welcome to Theme Thursday.
Yeah, thanks, Jim. I'm excited to be here as well. This season, we're running things a little bit differently. I would call today our quarter season summary episode.
That's a better way to say it. That was a much better way to say it.
I like wrap party too. It's just one of the many parties that we're going to have throughout the season. Really, what I hope to do is offer an opportunity to review where we've been, think about maybe the insights that we've discovered, and hopefully people realize that this is a constant journey, that even when you've been studying this and talking about it and utilizing it at work and in coaching, there's still more you can discover. So we're going to talk about that and summarize what we know to be true and consistent about the executing domain of the CliftonStrengths themes.
In the 6 seasons we've been doing this, this is the very first time we've looked at the domains by the themes. So the themes in order. We've always gone kind of alphabetically. First season is a little bit different. Kurt organized those differently. But I have learned, you said we hope they've learned, and I've actually learned a lot. When you look at these by their domain, I've been surprised at how much learning there is when we compare them to each other. And again, we've done that in various seasons past. But when you line them up against each other and then kind of think about them through the lens of, in this case, executing, it has really changed for me the way I kind of think about them. So I hope that's done it for others as well. Let's dive into the executing theme. What has it been all about for us?
So if we think about the 4 domains of leadership, executing is the first one alphabetically. It is a broad way to discuss one of the 4 ways that leaders influence their teams. And that's how it started, from research that led to Gallup's book, Strengths-Based Leadership. But since then, these domains in general have become a really great way, I think, to describe talent in a broader, more generalized way than looking at each specific CliftonStrengths theme. And that has been a need that people have maybe not overtly looked for, but I think found beneficial, especially when you realize that CliftonStrengths as a tool is an incredibly individualized assessment of talent and a way to describe who you are that's very different than likely anyone else you'll ever meet. Looking at them by domain offers a different lens on that. And executing talents are just that. Globally speaking, they are talents that describe a drive to get things done. Leaders with dominant executing talent know how to make things happen. So when you think about those themes within the executing domain, you find the natural tendency to work really hard, to think about that motivation to implement a solution. I think about this if you were to describe executing as a person, I see that person rolling up their sleeves and leading through effort.
I think if I were to summarize a sentence you said a lot during this section was, now remember, this is an executing theme, right? And it is, it's a good, for each one of those, it was a great reminder in that. And so as we think about each one of those, which CliftonStrengths themes show up and what do we know about them?
That's so great. And I didn't realize how many times I probably said that. Probably what I was bringing us back to was that these themes can always look different based on different people, different values that those people have, other themes that play along with them, different circumstances. And they shouldn't be limited to thinking that these are the tools that are only used for doing. And if you don't have these tools, you just don't do. So I'm guessing it was probably, I would use that sentence fragment anytime that I started to describe the theme in a way that felt a little bit more nuanced and a little bit less true to the standard definition, a little bit more of, here's how it can also be used. But then let's bring it back to really that drive, that motivation is to get things done. There are 9 themes within the Clifton Strengths executing domain. And I think what has been nice, and we heard this from a couple of our people in the community as well throughout the quarter, the 25% that we've done of the season so far, was the benefit of kind of marinating in one domain, really sitting there and seeing the similarities, the differences. Before this, honestly, when I even looked at team grids or at the DNA of a team, it was much easier for me to just see 4 things. And now that we've really gotten into unpacking that domain of executing, I've seen that it's more than just doing. So if you've got a team that's got some dominant executing talent, you can say yes, they're probably motivated to do, but there's some specific flavor within there. So looking at individual themes, I think, is going to help a manager sort out what kind of specific ways are their team inspired to execute. And sometimes people often wonder about the prevalence of themes, how often they should expect to see one specific theme or another. That is interesting. And I'm going to give you some fun data around that. But please be mindful. Don't be more interested in the globe than you are the functionality of your team. That being said, there's some trivia you might find helpful. When we look at themes showing up in people's top 5, the most common executing theme that shows up is also the most common theme that shows up around the world, and that is achiever. But do you know what the least common of the executing themes is? Jim, do you have a guess?
Discipline, I think.
Ding, ding, ding. We have a winner. It is discipline, but it's barely, it's by a very slight margin. So about 9% of the world have a focus in their top 5, and 7% of the world have discipline in their top 5. So just by a slight margin, and that's looking at more than 20 million people who have completed the Clifton Strengths assessment. So you can take a look at it. The other thing I would say is when we look at our global population, more than 20 million people having completed this, there are 3 executing themes that land in the global top 10. So comparing to all 34. If you want to guess what those 3 are in the chat, go ahead and type it into the chat. Jim, top of the head, knowing that you do have my notes.
I do. Well, certainly, we know achiever, responsibility. They show up quite a bit. The third one is a little questionable to me, but which one is that?
I actually was surprised by that one as well. It's restorative. So the answer to which 3 executing themes are also in the top 10 most prevalent in people's top 5 is achiever, responsibility, and restorative. So 19% of our total completes have restorative in their top 5. It's compared with 27% with responsibility, and 31% have achiever.
And that drops off pretty fast, right? When you think of
It does.
percentages. And Micah, to your point, I want people to be very, very cautious. I think sometimes on those rankings, we spend a lot of time on the trivia when we're with teams.
Yeah.
I hear a lot of people wanting to spend time in that trivia like it matters. It's interesting, but you got to start diving into what does it mean for this team, right? And the fact that a team is high in achiever, it shouldn't be a shock or a surprise, right? The reason it is because it's super common. Now, let's move on to the conversation and the team and say, how is this working its way out? Especially there are teams, and I see this in the Facebook groups all the time, where they want to start debating, or they want to start kind of fixating on the trivia. You got to move off the trivia and move on to the actual action.
And I think, I'm going to be maybe kind of bold and controversial by saying this very boldly out loud. I think sometimes when coaches are preparing, they over prepare on the trivia, or they think for some reason that their client is going to assess their credibility or assess their value of what they bring to the team based on how much they know about the global population, or what they can quickly on their feet say and really just assume about a team based on, do we have any of these popular themes, or do we have more of these other themes showing up? Well, you know what? That's not the value you're bringing. The value you're bringing is helping them have a conversation about the talents that they do have. And I would, anytime that you feel like teams are also fixating on understanding the makeup of the themes that are present, maybe be patient that might be a clue that they're not ready to talk about themselves yet. And I think that sometimes you can call that out. You can say, this is very interesting. What we really hope to get to is not just measuring, what's here, but really talking about how do we honor it? How do we make the most of it? We'll talk about that today with some ideas of examples, but that comes from conversation. And many times that comes from people having a coaching experience or an individualized experience where they get the opportunity to test out words that really mean the most to them about their profile, or taking their CliftonStrengths 34 report and sharing it with somebody who trusts them and who they trust, and asking for that feedback of how that shows up in their lives. I mean, you don't get to the place where people can confidently say, my manager focuses on what's right with me, if you get stuck looking at how your team is made up of.
Yeah. And there was a comment in one of the Facebook groups, I think John made it yesterday, talking about he almost feels, as a coach, he almost feels like he has a secret advantage when he goes in or when he's working with people and he knows their top five, because he kind of knows how they're motivated. And I think in the same regards, it's just as powerful for teams if we can focus them on these elements that make of power for them, and move quickly into be able to ask some questions that might draw out the best in them. So, Micah, as we think about those, what are some of those questions you think we could ask?
So, some of the questions we could ask, think about, what means go for me? What am I motivated by? What am I inspired by? When do I feel ready to go execute? All of these might have different answers based on what kind of executing talent they have. So, just like everyone is more than one word, which is, themes are not labels, and one of our CliftonStrengths guiding principles, the executing talent's going to change how it shows up depending on the specific themes that are present, really driving it. So think about a couple differences within those 9 themes. One of the things that executing is a motivation to do, but that shows up a little bit differently. Think about achiever is an internal motivation to complete a milestone. Responsibility is an external motivation to make good on a promise. Arranger, I would call situational motivation to progress more efficiently. Executing is also awareness of work. Belief comes about it with an awareness of the values that are at play within work, thinking about what's right and what's wrong. Consistency is an awareness of the whole, with a W, if you're just if you're not looking at my notes, the entity, the whole thing, being aware of what's fair, what's uniform, and what's scalable. Discipline is an awareness of the process. What is in order and what's out of order that maybe needs some sorting there. The third thing I would say executing is movement and drive. But it's going to, again, look a little bit differently. Restorative is moving from discarded to functional. Focus is moving without distraction. A deliberative is moving confidently and driven to reduce risk.
Micah, you called back some elements of season 1 there. Like, I want you to go, if you're listening to the audio, I want you to go back and listen to that again. Like, just rewind it. If you're listening live, you'll have to go back. But think about each one of those. Kurt would do this a lot, where we kind of focus on a word and then show how each one of those go based on that word. So when we talked about awareness, movement, motivation, right? I hope you didn't miss that. But those are things worth writing down. So if you haven't done that, rewind. Do people still rewind? Go back.
Skip back.
Skip back. And get it done. I think there's some really good. And I think, Micah, there's some good clues built into that as we think about how all these fit into that. You gave these 3 clues to talent when we talked about motivation, awareness, and moving. Mm-hmm. And then to say, how do all these play in that context with each other when they're combined? And I think that's just that's super awesome. So I'll look forward to that segment in the future quarters of this as well. So you mentioned it's more important to focus on the functionality of a team that's right in front of you. So how might a manager focus on a team that has a lot of talent in the executing domain?
Well, it always depends on what you want to accomplish. But let's say performance is an issue and your team is especially talented in executing. By the way, you're going to see that quite often. Executing of the 4 domains is the most prevalent in our global database. That might mean that individually, your team is really good at just running toward their own targets, but it doesn't necessarily translate to collaborative achievement without your guidance as a manager. That's an assumption. You're going to want to test it out before you just run with it, but you could look for opportunities to create shared routines. That might mean ask people to share what motivates them individually, like what means go You might encourage employees to identify times during their day, like actually during their workday when they are most productive, and then challenge them to add one more of those examples during their weekly calendar. You also might challenge them to notice moments of impressive productivity in other people, in their colleagues. So make it easy for them to offer praise to each other. At Gallup, in every break room, we physically have drops that you can write down and to deliver to somebody. But make it easy for them to call out those great performance moments or productivity moments in others, and direct that praise again to other people within their work. I think it's going to be tuning their eye both to the talents of their colleagues and also to what it is that you want to improve. You also might be looking for something completely different. So let's say you're hoping to improve opportunities for development with a team strong in executing or dominant, frequent in executing themes. You want to look to set short and long-term growth goals. Encourage people to rate or rank or sort their best performance in a specific field, and to make that part of their calendar, their regular routine. Think about that monthly, quarterly, annually. Check in on people's perceptions of development. I brought up development because it seems anytime I lead a Q12 session, one of the items that the without fail floats up to the top for people to where they want it to improve or they really want more conversation about it is this element around opportunities at work to learn and grow. So if that comes up for your team and you notice that that team is dominant in executing, ask them what they've accomplished that maybe they couldn't have done a year ago. Very often, especially with executing themes, these people might be more focused, more excited, and simply more aware of what's in front of them than they are looking around at what they've already created or already accomplished.
Okay, Mike, the big question, because this
Yeah.
gets asked all the time. I'm going in, we have no executing themes, right? And
Yeah.
what if we're low? What do we say then?
I say you're frequent or less frequent. And when you consider the DNA of the team, it really is, I think, helpful, practical, and fast to look at where every person has talent. So rather than saying you don't have strong executing, acknowledge that there might actually be people on your team who lead with it. But they might not be the majority of your team. So it's not weak, it's just rare. It's not gone, it's just it's a gem. It's a rarer sort of place. And again, that's something that you can do with a team that's very different than how you're going to approach it with an individual, which is nice. You've got embedded help there. You've got other people who you can lean on. And again, it's going to depend on what you want to accomplish, but it also depends on the makeup of the team. Now, a group of people who rely on each other for success are very different than a group of employees who rely only on their manager. Or maybe a third type would be a group of independent contributors who simply roll up to a leader on paper. So before you go about thinking that every team functions as a team and that you can have one standard approach, it's always good to ask yourself about that. You think about what is the level of interdependence for this team on a daily basis? What do we hope to learn or improve or solve with CliftonStrengths? And when will our team have another chance to practice what they learn in a conversation about strengths? So one of the ways that we know behavior change really sticks is practice. That's where you get the idea of 10,000 hours. That's where you know that you can't just have a really splashy, meaningful shared experience and expect that to stick without opportunities to follow up. Sometimes the real reason that people want to talk strengths and look at what are we high in, what are we low in, is just to improve the emotional state of the group. Oftentimes I get called in, and if I do a little bit of digging, I'll realize they're probably more concerned about a conflict than they are actually the makeup of the team. And it's more about how to take each team member into a place where they're more comfortable sharing what they want each other to know about themselves. Sometimes it is actually about how to work and partner together, in which case you might have more functional conversations about shifting who's responsible for different things. Now, it's okay if it's some of both of those situations that you're trying to solve for. It's also okay if it's neither of those, but you need to do your due diligence as a coach, a facilitator, a manager, to have a goal other than just let's discover the strengths of our team. Once that has been done, to answer your question, Jim, if you are a manager seeking to improve, let's say, collaboration, and your team's executing talent is rare, make partnership a goal. Talk about existing complementary partnerships in terms of what gets done. So think about what are the habits or the working expectations of the strongest partnerships that already exist. Look for those places. Maybe the whole group doesn't get along as a whole, but look for those places where you do have strong partnerships and tease that out. It might be within the team. It might be great partnerships that exist between one member of your team and somebody else that you rely on outside of your team. And look for which themes are dominant. That's always going to be, as I mentioned before, a faster way to get to where you're going. But ask maybe how would executing talent complement those dominant themes? So if we've got one or two people in a group of 5 or 6 who are high in executing, have a conversation about how. Have a conversation about what that partnership might look like and really talk about the value of collaborating there together. Remember, you don't need executing talent in order to get stuff done. So ask your team what motivates them to take action. Ask them what gets in the way of their executing. Because if you've got a group of people who just don't naturally think about doing, they might have a harder time completing tasks. That's just true. Now, let's first, before we assume that that's going to be a problem, let's ask how, is it a problem? Are we relying on other talents or are we not? Because it might very well mean that as a manager or leader of this team, you need to think about systems or overt expectations that are going to fill that void.
Yeah. One of my favorite when I'm in these kinds of conversations with teams, leading it or a part of it, and we come into a situation where a team may be low, to say what other teams around us actually exhibit or have this. And now you have to have their team grid as well to think about it. But to be able to look around and say, hey, much like the power of 2 with individuals, teams can play in those same spaces to say, we don't do this very well. How could we partner with this team maybe to get some of these things done? I love your. Go ahead.
I don't want to let people off the hook. And I don't want the message that you hear to just be, well, you don't need executing to get things done. Because that gives you, if you look at a team grid and it's rare in executing, that gives you really fast insight to what might be tripping these people up. And before you just say, I don't need that, I get it done in other ways, have the conversation.
Yeah, well, you and I low in executing. Like, let's just be really honest. You and I get
super
a lot
low.
of stuff done.
Like super low.
Yeah, like really low. And you and I get a lot of stuff done. I mean, I think about the 100 or plus webcasts we get done every single year here at Gallup. The 400 episodes that I've created on my own. Like, I mean, that doesn't give me the excuse, well, I can't execute, so I can't get anything done, right? Woo communication can be a powerful mover of things, even though it's not in the executing domain.
I also think, so one of my coaches this week asked me that about myself. I have one executing theme in my top 22. It's number 10, and it's belief, which I had always dismissed as not an executing theme to me. But when she pressed me on it, I had this really meaningful kind of new understanding about myself and my ability to execute. And she had asked me almost what you just said there, Jim. She said, Mikey, you drive yourself really hard. And I think you're kind of detail oriented and you come across as having your finger on the pulse of what needs done. Where does that come from? And I learned more about my belief and how it shows up and how it is. For me personally, I value hard work. I value the autonomy that comes with it. And I value it to a point that I work for it. And that is executing. You could probably find, just because if you look at our full profile, it's incredibly rare. It doesn't mean that there's not one theme that is pulling a lot of weight. So that's also important. Now, we skate a line there where I don't want people to feel like, oh, there's a hole in this domain within my team, but don't worry, I've got one theme at number 17 that I can call upon, because the truth is you're not going to. Like, you're not ever going to be mindful enough, especially in a time when other people are relying on you, to stop and thoughtfully put on a supporting themes hat and work in a way that you don't naturally work. It's probably a whole lot better to think about systems, partnerships, expectations, habits that you can develop, instead of saying, I've got the strengths I need when I need it. I just have to be mindful about calling upon them. Yeah. Strengths-based performance is looking at what you don't have to be mindful about calling upon.
Right. No, right on. Okay. It's just some really good stuff. Where can I find more of it?
Well, if you liked it, I wrote it. If you thought it was not helpful, then blame somebody else. But what we've been talking about today is a sample of the personalized management nudges that are available in Gallup Access. Gallup Access is our online portal into the world of everything that Gallup knows, discovers, and continues to learn. And managers who use Gallup Access get individualized suggestions, just like what we were talking about today. Every time they log in, and the system learns them and learns what their problems are, what the makeup of their team is, what they're facing, what they're searching. So it's kind of like having a coach in your pocket or on your screen.
Yeah, and remember that's at our subscription level. So that's
Yep.
for those folks that are logging in and have a Gallup. Many organizations have purchased a subscription. Some coaches have that available as well, and you can get more information about that. Gallup.com/access will get you there. There are also some tremendous resources. I'll say it here rather than mentioning it at the end. If you haven't become a student of Gallup.com/CliftonStrengths, you should. There's tons of resources available for
Without
you
a
out there
subscription.
as well that are absolutely free that you can share with people as well. So there's a great way to do that. We got some feedback during this quarter. I love that you call it a quarter. I never thought of it in those terms.
Right?
Like it's almost like the first quarter of school. What have we heard from the community?
Well, I pulled a couple specific things that our community had told us that they learned about executing talent. The first one's from Caroline. She says, I sometimes forget that people strong in executing do just that. They execute. Being someone who leads with other domains, I have to remind myself of that. And if they come across as harsh or abrasive, I just remember we're on the same team. We're working from different lenses of success. I love that one. Megan says that more about the way that we're structuring the season. She goes, I love the clear structure that you're working with every week. It's so helpful, especially for someone with high focus and discipline. And Steve says he pulled out one of the things we haven't talked about yet, which is the discussion that we pulled from strengths-based leadership, the 5 truths of a strong team. He says it's a great discussion with the team, ranking your team on those 5 and asking, what do we do that makes them great? And again, those top 5 truths of a strong team are that they focus on results, not conflict. They do what's best for the organization and then get going. Their personal lives matter as much as their work lives do. There's an element of diversity, and they are magnets for other talent.
Micah, we have also spent some time in talent mindfulness this season as well as the season prior. What have been your thoughts and what's coming up next?
I'm surprised at how much people liked it still. I guess maybe I'll let that surprise go and just like step into my my power there. But it came back by popular demand. Talent mindfulness. Originally it was this idea of let's practice strengths. Let's not just think about learning them and then learning them in an advanced way and then learning them again. Let's actually experience them for ourselves. So I've really enjoyed that. Some of the main themes throughout the executing season have focused on how do you do your best work, what motivates you to do great work, what's getting in your way. We were real bold and talked about, what's something that you've done wrong. How do you address a mistake that you've made or perhaps a vulnerability that you've made? You can think about those just like they're written. You can experience them, play them as an audio clip or watch the YouTube video and just sort of sit and meditate on them. That's how they were designed, but they're also really, I think, great classroom activities that they're great coaching questions. So use them, play them for yourself, play them for others. You can find those in every episode of season 5, and so far our first quarter of season 6.
Yeah, at the end, we've been toying with pulling them out, but for now, I really like them as kind of part of Theme Thursday. I think it's an important thing to go through. Is we have the opportunities there. We've heard your feedback, and we know that you guys would like those individually. As we think about what's coming up with the next domain, why don't you announce that now? No surprise, but what are we doing
next? The next domain is the best.
It is the best. We're gonna have to work really hard to keep these to 20 or 25 minutes. This is gonna be hard for us. But what are we talking about?
If you wonder why we're saying that, just look at our top 10. It's influencing. It is actually the rarest domain when you look at these themes showing up in people's top 5. Influencing, you usually don't see a ton of in our 20 million people who've completed it. We're still going to do 2 themes per episode, starting with activator and command, but we also have communication, competition, maximizer, self-assurance, significance, and woo. I'm excited that we get to some of those themes this is almost trivial, but some of those themes are at the bottom alphabetically. I'm excited that we get to explore those in the first half of our season because there's something different about changing up the order and the curiosity that people bring to it, where we are in listening to the season.
Yeah, no, I'm anxious for it in a lot of ways. It's one because we know a lot about them. They fit us really, really well. But I'm anxious to look at them all in under the domain umbrella and have that same, like, executing made things so much clearer for me in a lot of ways, of understanding belief through like, as an example, understanding belief through the term of an executing theme, right? I'm not sure. I always study belief in the context of, because my partner has it number one.
Yeah.
Right now it's like, wait a minute. So I am looking forward to digging in and really thinking, like, what is this influencing domain and how are all these, because I have four in there, and how do they fit together? So it'll be a ton of fun.
Honestly, I think it's gonna stretch me. Influencing is the hardest domain that I find words to describe what it is. And maybe it's because I have so many of them. And if you look at my algorithm that describes my dominant leadership style, it is influencing. So maybe that's why I have a hard time with it. But I'm looking forward to learning more about it. Influencing on the whole, it describes leaders who lead through others. It's a lot about advocating for your team, taking up space socially, and it's a presence. I think for sure. I think I struggle because I also have strategic number one. So I have a hard time just letting the influencing be instead of thinking about having a strategy behind the influence. But I know that I'll get better at it. Again, we've found from the first quarter of our season that really staying within the domain reveals a lot about the power of each individual theme.
It does indeed. All right, let's put a bow on it. Any other final thoughts on executing as we wrap this?
It's beautiful. I think we've seen that it's multifaceted, that it can be. There was a lot that came up about executing themes showing up as compassion and stability. And I think it's important to see that as well instead of just summarize it as, oh, those are people who like to go do.
Yeah, I think people are wonderful creations that we just need to learn more about and spend time with and really directing them to be productive. So, Micah, fun to wrap this with that. I'll remind everyone to take full advantages. We mentioned this, of all the resources that are available to you. Gallup.com/CliftonStrengths. If you haven't become a student of that site yet, there's lots of information, and we continue to pour enormous amounts of resources in there that are available for you. Don't forget, while you're there, sign up for the Clifton Strengths community newsletter, just a monthly newsletter, kind of keeps you on top of everything that's going on in the community. If you haven't followed us on YouTube yet, go ahead and do that. If you're on YouTube right now, there's a subscription button, right? Actually, it's below Micah, that you can click the bell. That way you get notified whether we do that. We do have two YouTube channels, a live one and an edited one. And you can do that on both. And anytime we publish something new, you get a notification of that. Just kind of a good way to stay up. If you're busy, and most of us are, a good way to stay up to date with that. If you're a podcast listener, and why wouldn't you be, right? Recapture that time in a train, in a plane, in a car, doing the dishes, walking the dog.
Under the channel.
Total. Yeah. On a train in the channel, or the chunnel, as they call it, I think there. You should. Any podcast app that's available to Android, iPhone, just search Gallup Webcast and you'll see Theme Thursday there. While you're there, sign up for Call to Coach as well. Great opportunity for you to hear what's going on in our coaching world. And we'd love to have you subscribe to that. If you have any questions, or if you just love to book us for an engagement, I've never said that publicly, but if you want to book us for an engagement, that'd be great.
We're so bookable.
Wouldn't that be great to just,
we did not talk about this, but yeah.
I know. I'm just,
can you imagine how fun it would be?
I know.
To have us in real life.
I know. On site. If you want to do that, send us an email. Coaching@Gallup. Is that too forward? Coaching@Gallup.com. You can also see a complete list of all of our courses that are available, both virtual and in person. Courses.Gallup.com. If you'd like to get a list of everything that's coming up in the future from a webcast perspective, you want to join us live, because live is better. Head over to gallup.eventbrite.com and follow us there, and you'll get a notification whenever I publish something new. Join us live and in person, Clifton's, for the Gallup at Work Summit. I don't know when I'm going to get that right. Here, June 1st, 2nd, and 3rd, GallupAtWork.com. You can register for that right now. All breakouts are out. All keynotes have been announced. Everything is there that you need. We'd love to have you join us here in June. Join us on our Facebook group, facebook.com/group/call-to-coach. On LinkedIn, search Get Clifton Strengths Trained Coaches and ask to be let into that group, and I will do that as well. Want to thank you for joining us today as we wrap up the executing domain and move on to influencing in the next couple weeks. Thanks for joining us. If you're listening live, stay around for some post show. With that, we'll say goodbye, everybody.